Hi everybody, nice to see a lot of familiar faces. Yeah, just a couple of things before we start. Firstly, I must admit, I'm not a photographer. um, I'm just doing this based on identification, really. So I hope it helps just to verify a few points, really. And also, surprisingly, I hardly ever take pictures of bugs. Can you believe it? So I have used a lot of other recorders' pictures, photographs that have been sent. So I have given them credit within the talk. So thank you all if you have actually have a photograph in my talk. So thank you for that. So photographing bugs for identification. Let me just, I thought I'd do a bit of a flicky round slide just to keep you awake, you see. So some species are pretty unmistakable, you know, which tends to be the more brightly coloured, colourful things. A lot of the ladybirds, for instance, cardinal beetles, which are big and bright red, lots of other things like that, butterflies, pretty unmistakable. And this is a one which was sent by Gavin Blakeway just for this year. This is a first record for Radnorshire in Raider, and he thought it was a fly or a wasp, and he rescued this from his pond. And the significant thing is he had a wasp nest very close to the edge of the pond, and he fished this out. It was very wet and horrible, and really any picture even out of focus would have done for this one, because it's a very distinctive beetle, believe it or not, and it's the wasp nest beetle. And it's one of them species, like many with climate change, it's sort of heading north and west, and it's now in Radnorshire. Very distinctive with the very bright orange wing cases. It sticks its wings out behind the wing case, very thin wing cases, but the antennae are incredible as well. So it really can't be mistaken for any other insect, really. So that's an easy one. And then just looking at a sense of scale. This is me with my son, who's 9, and he's taller than me now. So so it is difficult to sometimes you concentrate on getting a good photograph of something close, and you forget to, a bit of perspective would be good in terms of scale. There's not many people who are going to have a ruler to hand in the pocket when they're taking a photograph. But obviously, if I'm doing specimens, it's useful to have a measuring device. And this is just a nice easy one, because these are 2 pond skaters, and a normal pond skater is on the right. There's quite a lot of species of them, and on the left is a very large one, and this is the river skater, and it's nearly twice as big as any of the other pond skaters, and it only occurs on rivers. So obviously, if you can get some kind of perspective, in terms of measurement, would be good, whether you use a matchstick or anything you can. Often, if you're doing things like bees and hoverflies, things like the flowers will give you a good size to tell, the size of the species. But often, the size of something can be very important. Again, if you haven't got anything to hand, you can use your hand, literally. If something isn't going to fly off, particularly things like beetles are quite sluggish mostly, and they will sit on your hand for a few seconds. This is a water stick insect, nearly as wide as my hand, that Keith Noble took a photograph of there quite a few years ago at Penland Pond in Brecon. Very unmistakable species, so no issues there with identification. And again, this is Andy Shaw found this flying about his garden, I think, south of Bilf. And this is the, put it on his finger, and it's the lesser earwig, which is very widespread, but very tiny. But you can get the size just by the size of his finger. So it's very, very tiny little earwig. And we haven't got hardly any records of these in Radnorshire. So that was a really nice record to take. So using your hands, using your fingers gives you a very good scale of things. And sometimes any photograph is good because this is a tiny little ladybird called a Redrump Skymist ladybird. Skymist is its genus name. And it's when I tell you it is only 2 millimeters long, you can see the difficulty in getting a good focused photograph. It didn't matter. You're probably not going to make a poster of it because it's 2 millimeters, but you can see the distinctive orange sort of horseshoe shaped coloration of there on the front of its thorax and head, and an orange sort of tip to the tail as well. And that's all you need to get an identification, even something which is only 2 millimeters. So anything is better than nothing. Okay. And then looking at angle, this is one of a bee. This is head on, probably not the best angle to take overall, but you know, combination of factors. Luckily, the person took 2 or 3 of this bee from the side as well, and I was able to identify it 2 species. It's the Forktail Flower Bee. I've actually forgotten who sent me this. I normally put the people's name on, but if this is one of yours, please let me know and I shall credit you appropriately in the future. So overall, probably not the best angle. It's in quite dark light as well. And from the top, now a lot of people do take photographs of most things from directly above, which is generally okay. And this is a sawfly, and it's a very distinctive sort of black and orange species. Now there's several species which look identical to these. It isn't just the one. The 2 features of this is that these dark stigmas on the wing here, it has very dark shading sort of between the stigmas. These fold the wings overlapping across the wings when the rest. But a really good, very fortunate is that the legs, particularly the rear legs, are sticking out. Now that's a key identification feature in this type of these Arg sawflies, because they do have different leg coloration. And this one you can see has got very distinctive black knees and black at the tips of the tibia. And that's crucial because some of the other ones are almost identical, but without that color pattern on the legs. Okay. Again, this is taken from the side. Now, grasshoppers and bush crickets, this is a bush cricket, Roselle bush cricket, they're very laterally flattened from side to side. So to take a picture from above, you're not going to see an awful lot of the insect. So you need a little bit of common sense, really. So as grasshoppers and bush crickets tend to be vertically challenged, as it were, it's best to take it from the side or from the side and above. So this is a lovely picture, another one of Keith's. Thank you, Keith. And the Roselle's bush cricket is very similar to a scarcer one called the bog bush cricket. And if you look on the top of this pronotum, it's called, this sort of saddle-shaped plate, which sits over the top of the thorax. On the Roselle's bush cricket, this lovely pale yellow, pale green edging goes all the way around, whereas in the bog bush cricket, it just appears on the rear edge, and that is a really important feature. But also, with being taken from the side, the Roselle's bush cricket has these lovely, again, pale yellow greeny markings just at the base of the abdomen there, which again is distinctive, which the bog bush cricket doesn't have. So again, it's a bit of knowledge, knowing roughly what something is. Is it a grasshopper? Let's take a picture from the side. Is it a fly or a sawfly? Let's take it from slightly above or to the side. Little tips, really. You can see why I don't take many pictures of both. This is one of mine, a green-veined white. And again, if you're taking a picture from above, you might be able to get identification, but because you can see the yellow underwing there, you can just make out the dark green veining on the underside of the wing. And that's very distinctive, obviously, in the green-veined white. And the other whites, small white, large white, etc., hasn't got such a dark green vein. Again, underside of some insects, particularly butterflies, can be important. Things like the hair streak butterflies, and because they do close the wings particularly close up when the rest, that's good to take a picture of the underwings as well if you can, and some of the fritillaries as well. Okay. And this is just an example upside down. The back swimmers, or the greater water boatmen, as the sometimes called, these are the ones that do swim upside down. And this is one of my pin specimens, which is literally swimming upside down, and that's how they swim when they're in the water. So if you fish one out in a little jam jar or something, they will be upside down. So you can't identify them unless you get a picture from the top, because it's these four wings, the wing cases, if you like, which fold down over the body, which protect the membranous second pair, which have different colours. And these are the common three species. This one is Notonecta glauca. They haven't got common names, unfortunately, which is probably the most widespread species. This has very pale, overall pale brown wings. The one in the middle here, this is called maculata, macula as in spotted, and it's got heavily spotted black wings, you can see there. And then the one to the right is called obliqua, very well named because you can see it's got these oblique, pale and dark stripes. This one is a more of an upland acidic pool species. So taking a picture of these can be difficult, because if you try to flip them over for a few seconds, they'll flip straight back again. So what I would suggest is that you hold the jar above you and take a picture from underneath if you can. And again, you might, if you're lucky enough, you might get a picture from the side, because you can see this one, Notonecta glauca. This is the same species, the one underneath. I've taken a picture from the side, very pale, but notice it has a little row of black spots just on the edge as well. So taking a picture from sort of 3/4 of an angle, if you like to call it that, not quite from the top, not from the side, you will see, you know, the legs and some of the underside, and often the mouth parts as well beneath the insect. So that is probably overall the best angle to take a picture from, really, if you can. Just a couple of problems here with identification. Just doing okay, checking my time. This is a couple of hoverflies. This is it's sort of it's not scarce, but it's pretty uncommon large bumblebee mimic hoverfly here on the left, a Cryarena, and this is very similar to another Cryarena species. Now, the trouble with hoverflies is when they rest, they tend to hold the wings overlapped down over the abdomen. This one, fortunately, is very hairy bumblebee mimic, So you can see a lot of the hairs sticking out and underneath the wings as well. But some of them do have darkened wings, which would obscure that abdomen pattern. So again, it would be a good idea really to try to take that picture, if you can, slightly from one side, so you can get an idea of the colour of the abdomen. Luckily, this species, it did stick one of its legs out, its rear legs, which is very, very inflated. The other species, the rear femur, is quite narrow, so we're able to identify that to species, thank goodness. And this is one of the large honeybee mimic hoverflies, the Eristalis, probably Pertinax, but hard to say because again the legs here are, you can see the femur at the top, but the tibia and the tarsi are folded underneath, and really it's quite critical in a lot of the hoverflies, the colour of the legs. So again, if you can get a picture from the side or 3/4 from the side, that would give us a much better hopefully idea of what the leg colour is. Again, very distinctive species, nothing else like this. It's called the false ladybird beetle, not surprisingly, but it's actually a fungus beetle. And taken by Pete and Ginny Clark, off recorded in Radisher. And again, it's quite a local species, but it gives you an idea of this thing about light and shade, because you can see on the left-hand side the light, possibly, I don't know if this was taken indoors, coming from the window or the light here, but the right-hand side is in shade. Now, is that head black, or is it very dark red? Well, it is actually very, very dark, almost black, with orange mouth parts. So perhaps if that was taken a little bit more towards the light, the head end, would have been slightly more lit up on the head end. So just be aware of that as well. I know invariably insects are very quick moving, and you've only got a split second to try to get photographs. So if you can take more than one, really, from different angles, that's the secret. And then you can choose which ones to send me. Another issue, again, is don't automatically home in really close to the insect, because you might miss really important details, as in, where was it? Which habitat was it in? And this bumblebee is a very distinctive species with yellow, pale yellow stripes, with a lovely bright orange abdomen, and it's feeding on heather, I think bell heather. And it was taken in heather moorland. And even just making a note of that with your records is really useful for recorders like myself, because you can see, get a better idea of where the species occur. Okay, and this is an upland species called the bilberry bumblebee, which only occurs around heather moorland, bilberry moorland. So that's a very good to have the surrounding heather areas as well. Okay. Are we doing for time?
It looks like we've got about a minute and a half left by the looks of it.
Okay, brilliant, perfect, okay. Oh, there you go. Again, this is a very distinctive beetle called the skullcap leaf beetle. And again, didn't really need a close-up, because a lovely picture, you actually get a little bit of the habitat in, and guess what it's feeding on? It's lesser skullcap. And this is the only plant that this beetle feeds on. So having a picture of the beetle feeding on its food plant, and this is obviously only occurs in marshy grassland. So it's a marshy grassland plant, and the beetle is very local. So that's really good to have the picture of the plant as well. So just bear that in mind. This is one by Richard Knight of a hoverfly. It's one of two almost identical species, but he took this one slightly from the side, which is great. You can see the abdomen there. The other species, Campestris, has dark edging to the thorax and a longer nose. This one's got a long nose, but it's slightly shorter, and it's mostly an orange abdomen. So we're able to identify that to species, which is great. But also, he accidentally photographed a couple of nettle tap moths in there. So that's 2 records